accountable to you. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tavis, Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number 1-800-920-1580. 1-800-920-1580. In this hour, two conversations. On the B side of this hour, has cancel culture become a threat to free speech? A conversation with essayist, author, and former political writer for the New Republic, Eve Fairbanks. But we commence this hour in conversation with our resident physician, Dr. Robert Drummond, about the higher than usual number of flu cases this season and whether or not we should be alarmed about a possible triple-demic. Dr. Drummond, always, sir, good to be in dialogue with you. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing the best I can. If I complain, I'd be an ingrate, man. So I'm just glad to be here and glad to have you on with us. Before I get to this concern that people have about a triple-demic that we might be facing, let me just give you some space to paint here. We haven't talked in a bit about about COVID. I have a friend of mine right now who it's the first case I've had close to me of someone dealing with long-term COVID. I've been hearing about it, reading about it. You and I have discussed it, but it's very different when you know somebody who's suffering from it. So the first person in my immediate space who I know is suffering from long-term COVID. This ain't no joke, man.
No, it's not. It's not at all. Yeah. And I wish we would talk a little bit more about it. For those that are listening, long COVID can present in anywhere from 25 to 30% of patients who are positive with SARS-CoV-2. And so sometimes, even if the symptoms resolve a little bit, they may have long-standing neurological problems, respiratory problems, or many other problems. I know one of my patients is a former marathon runner. They can barely walk now. They just had long-term neurological problems and never recovered. So, yeah, it's definitely a problem.
Yeah. Tell me more about why some people end up, many of us have had COVID, and thankfully more of us don't have long COVID. But what's the distinction? How does one, end up in a long COVID situation?
I tell you, the best way I can describe it is bad luck. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, what we have seen about it is that there's a certain group of population based on their genetics that can have completely asymptomatic SARS-CoV-2 infection. Mm. And then there's some individuals that got a little sick, some that got very sick, and then some that died. And so we have no way of predicting which one of those individuals or which category an individual is going to be into. And that's the same thing for long COVID. We have no way of predicting who's going to get long COVID and what type of long COVID they're going to get. Some of it we understand, right, when you're talking about individuals, like I've discussed patients that have lost their sense of taste and smell and it never came back, or it came back and everything tastes like acid or everything tastes like, batteries. We understand kind of what's happening at the cellular level, but we don't know why it's choosing this person versus that person. We just haven't understood the genetics from that perspective. And so, again, everyone will experience this virus differently. The biggest thing that we did see was that in vaccination, so that was another reason that we were really pushing individuals to consider vaccination, is because it could reduce that 25 to 30% chance down significantly from having long COVID.
Let me ask you a few questions about long COVID, and we'll move on to talk about this triple-demic. Number one, how does one get diagnosed with long COVID versus just having COVID?
Well, I'll tell you, the symptoms for COVID really shouldn't last between 2 to 3 weeks. That should be kind of the extent of what we were seeing on average. When you start seeing individuals go from 4 weeks to 6 weeks to 8 weeks, There's no definitive, kind of time frame, but that's when we would start to consider someone for long COVID. Anything that's really kind of going beyond 3 to 4 weeks, any symptoms.
Secondly, we know that persons who have pre-existing conditions are more vulnerable, have been more vulnerable to contracting COVID. Are pre-existing conditions in any way relevant to those who get long COVID? I heard you say earlier it's just bad luck, and you got a marathon runner as a former patient who can barely walk now, so maybe the answer is no. But you tell me whether or not pre-existing conditions matter at all in persons who contract long COVID.
Yeah, I think the studies and all the data is showing that, yes, it does, right? So on average, individuals that have pre-existing conditions, more pre-existing conditions, and those are kind of loosely defined, whether it be obesity, morbid obesity, individuals that are immunosuppressed, et cetera, that there is a higher percentage of those individuals that are having long COVID. But to be honest, it really is very difficult to predict.
Yeah. We also know that race has played a factor. Who got COVID, who didn't, who died from it, who survived it. So I'm just running through a list of those things, trying to see if those factors also apply to long COVID. So with regard to long COVID, does race make a difference? Because we, again, discuss pre-existing conditions, which oftentimes afflicts black people, but do we have any data yet that suggests that people of color are being impacted, or black people are being impacted more by long COVID than anybody else, perhaps?
Yeah, I haven't. It's very difficult to try to actually find good data on long COVID because the symptoms vary so much. I don't see it really kind of walking down, I guess you would say, ethnic lines the way we saw morbidity and mortality falling down ethnic lines.
And finally, on long COVID, anything about age that we can connect to long COVID?
Yes. So just very similar to the fact that we saw individuals that were a little older, and when we say older, we think 65 and older, that had worse morbidity and mortality associated with it. We are seeing more long COVID in those individuals as well.
Talk about it any number of times in your regular appearances on this program, and of course I'm reading about it and studying it and becoming aware of it for other conversations on this program, but it is quite different when someone is in your immediate space and you know they are suffering from dealing with long COVID, and it's just tragic to see that they can't stop coughing, they can't seem to advance beyond it, their energy level is diminished. It's tough to watch somebody deal with long COVID, and so I thought I would ask some of those questions to get a better understanding of how long COVID differs from COVID. Now we've traversed that territory. When we come forward with our resident physician, Dr. Robert Drummond, I'll tell you more about what he does when he's not on the radio, and then we'll talk about this triple-demic that some are concerned we might be facing sooner than later. Dr. Robert Drummond on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Ride the K, Metro's newest rail line. 7 shiny new K-Line stations connect you to the E-Line, West Adams, the Crenshaw District, Baldwin Hills, Lamert Park, Inglewood, Westchester, and more. Learn more about the new K-Line and all the places you can go at metro.net/K-Line. KBLA Talk 1580 is the official station of the K-Line.
Haven't voted yet? Save time and avoid the Election Day lines by voting early. Visit plan.lavote.gov to find a vote center in your neighborhood and stop by before Tuesday, November 8th.
For generations, our families have worked hard to accomplish the dream of owning a home. Not just but roots beneath their feet. A place to gather and reconnect with loved ones. A home to pass down through the generations. It's your turn now, and Rocket Mortgage is here to help open the doors to home ownership. Rocket is an expert when it comes to buying a home, and we have the tools to help you get there. In this competitive market, a verified approval can give you an edge with sellers. You'll stand out because your finances have been approved, so they'll know you're a serious buyer. So, when it's time to buy that house and make it your dream home, Rocket can. Let us help you get started. Call 888-900-0409 today or visit rocketmortgage.com.
A verified approval is based on an underwriter's analysis of your individual financial information appraisal and title report. Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender license in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Did you know Marant Clinical Services, located downtown Long Beach and the Inland Empire, licensed marriage and family therapists offering confidential evening and weekend telehealth therapy sessions to busy professionals, couples, and adult families. Request appointment at MarantClinicalServices.com. That's Marant, MORANT, clinicalservices.com. We are focused on improving relationships, even if that relationship is with yourself. We get you in and get you out so you can get on with your life. MarantClinicalServices.com.
This Sunday and every Sunday is the African Marketplace and Drum Circle Community Market. Get free groceries, essential resources, and buy black from local merchants of arts, beauty, custom black merchandise, and more. Choose from a wide variety of cuisines, custom-made clothing, jewelry, and a lot more. Experience the true essence of Africatown at Leimert Park every Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Join the Drum Circle, dance, enjoy live performances, connect with Black excellence every Sunday in Africatown at Leimert Park. You can find us on Degnan Boulevard near Vernon and Crenshaw in the heart of Africatown at Leimert Park. That's the African Marketplace and Drum Circle Community Market. Join us for music, shopping, food, and fun this and every Sunday. Support black businesses, recycle black dollars, and feed your soul. The African Marketplace and Drum Circle Community Market every Sunday in Africatown at Leimert Park. Brought to you by Africatown Enterprise and the African Village Vendors Association.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Our guest in this first half hour of this hour is Dr. Robert Drummond, our resident physician. He is a concierge physician, a physician scientist, an urgent care physician, a medical consultant, a husband, a father. When he has time, he actually calls in to talk to me about the things that are on my mind. So I thank Dr. Drummond once again for being the resident physician on this program. No one better at discussing these kinds of issues than Dr. Drummond, and we're always pleased to have him on the program. Before I go to triple-demic, two other things I want to ask right quick about long COVID. Is it the case that if persons had received proper treatment early on when they contracted COVID, that long COVID might not have happened? I heard you suggest earlier that vaccinations we know make a difference, but I'm just trying to see, even though one may pull the short straw, as to say, to echo what you said earlier, that one may have bad luck in getting long COVID. Are there things that might have been done differently, even in the bad luck cases, that might have kept long COVID away?
Well, I think so, but I guess there's a few ways that you can answer that. Mm-hmm. First, what I try to make sure everyone understands is I want them to be healthy all the time. I want them exercising. I want them taking multivitamins. And so what we know is that individuals that were in a healthier state prior to contracting SARS-CoV-2 and getting COVID-19, there was a reduced chance of both being symptomatic and having long COVID. Now, the mitigation strategies, meaning the monoclonal antibody therapies, or the high-dose vitamin D therapies in the hospital, or even some of the newer treatments, right, like Paxlovid, and what extent that they are kind of reducing long COVID, I think still remains to be seen. There is a very big study, what we call a multi-center study. It's called RECOVER, okay, RECOVER. You can go and you can look up RECOVER, and this is the NIH study that they're actually studying long COVID. And they're going to be looking at, anywhere around 20,000 adults, 20,000 children, and doing everything from retrospective analysis, cohort analysis, et cetera, to try to better understand who was more susceptible to long COVID, what were the things that they were treated with, the real reduction in long COVID in individuals that were vaccinated, et cetera, et cetera. Takes a lot of data to kind of get some of those answers.
No, I can see that. Do we know anything at this point, though, about how this is impacting babies, children?
No, right now, I think some of that still remains to be seen. We did see some form of long COVID. So I talked about this kind of a while back when the numbers were about 20 to 30% at the peak of the pandemic of long COVID for adults. Right. It seemed like it was around 4.5% to 5% for children. much, much lower, but still concerning, right? And then how that has changed now that Omicron has kind of taken over again. We'll still be looking at that data.
I'll put you on the spot right quick before you go to the triple-demic concerns. I know I'll get 1,000 questions about this today if I don't ask this. So I'm going to ask it now. Whatever a physician of your stature says, exercise and take multivitamins, the obvious question is, okay, doc, what are you taking? Because if you're my doctor and you're taking it, I want to take it. So what are you taking?
So I'll tell you, I looked around and tried to find something. I try not to call out names of vitamins. Sure. I don't want to be giving away some free advertising here. But fair. I will say this. There is a company that makes a 7-in-1 multivitamin that has all of and specifically I want to say vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, elderberry, echinacea, and there's a couple of others, ginger, and I can't think of the last one. But it has those 7, and that's something that I take 2 pills a day, every single day, and they actually make versions of that for children that are gummies. Again, this is not big pharma. This is not anyone taking anything other than just natural vitamins to basically try to be as healthy as possible every day.
Miles, look it up for me. Look it up. You already said. JD, Miles, find that vitamin for me. He don't want to give no brand names. I ain't mad at him, but somebody find it for me right quick. and order it before I get off the air, please. Dr. Roman, thank you for laying that out for me. Now to triple-demic. This is a real concern for some people that we may be fighting a trifecta, as it were, at one time. Tell me what the 3 parts of this triple-demic are.
So if you're talking about influenza, COVID-19, and RSV, those are the 3 big things that we're kind of seeing happening all at the same time right now.
And by RSV, we mean?
Respiratory syncytial virus.
Right.
So I'm sorry. So go ahead. I'm not going to get into defining them and all of that.
No.
I'm sorry. It's your show.
No. It's our show. You know how we do this together, man. So you know exactly what to do. When I ask you what RSV means, that's your cue to take it and run with it. So go.
Right. So RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, it typically was a virus that kind of caused, common cold symptoms, right? So there's hundreds of viruses that cause common cold symptoms. This is another, single-stranded, who we call negative sense single-stranded RNA virus. It works a little bit different than SARS-CoV-2, than influenza, right? And so when you on the outside of SARS-CoV-2, we think about what we call H and N proteins on the outside of influenza. That's what gives you the, H3N2 that you hear people talking about. That's hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. And those are just 2 proteins that can interchange. There's like 18 different hemagglutinins and 11 different neuraminidases. They can all interchange to give a different version of the influenza virus. And on the outside of this respiratory syncytial virus, there's 2 main proteins, and the main protein that we look at is something called the fusion protein. So there's a glycoprotein and then there's a fusion protein, and that fusion protein really is the big target of the current vaccines that are in trials right now that are actually seem to be doing very well. There's 2 vaccines that are being tried. They're in phase 3 trials right now, and looking at the reduction of severe and critical RSV disease.
Mm-hmm. So, what? Tell me more about the fear that all 3 of these things may collide as we move into the winter months.
Well, I think the problem that we have is a double-edged sword when you have everyone walking around washing their hands and wearing masks. That's great. If they did that forever, that would be phenomenal. But what you're also doing is reducing the exposure to everyday pathogens that people need, and that's what we've done over the last couple of years. So we have essentially kind of primed, or should I say, taken our immune system and had it fall back a little bit, and it's focused that it's almost forgotten about some of these everyday viruses. And so the fear is that these viruses will come and we're going to basically respond differently. I don't want to say it's the sky is not falling. So, I'm very big at saying the sky is not falling, all right? This is not the sky is falling situation. But it does mean our bodies are going to respond to them a little bit different than they would had we been exposed to them over and over. So now that somehow our bodies have found a way to, or should I say SARS-CoV-2 has found a way to share real estate with these other viruses. For the last 2 years, it basically beat these viruses into submission, both the combination of SARS-CoV-2 and our mitigation strategies. We're reducing mitigation strategies worldwide, no more distancing, no more masks, etc. And on top of that, SARS-CoV-2 seems to have morphed in a way that it's kind of sharing real estate. So it's kind of all of the storm hitting us at the same time. And what we are seeing is, record levels in terms of the last 10 years of due to influenza, and we're seeing the same thing for things like respiratory syncytial virus also. But I will continue to refrain from thinking that the sky is falling. In the past, these viruses, they do cause some damage, obviously, and there is some slight mortality associated with them, but it's usually very, very low, especially compared to SARS-CoV-2. And I would hope that that's probably going to be maintained now.
Yeah, that's why I love you. I love the way you explain stuff. It beat the other viruses into submission. I'm quoting you on that. It beat the other viruses into submission. I think I get it, but let me just ask you this question again directly. Why are there so many more cases of flu in this season? Why are the numbers up specifically in flu cases?
Well, I think it's difficult to answer that. I mean, we saw this coming, right? So we saw this coming. I posted about this probably a month ago when I looked at the numbers from Australia, and I saw that it's not just that there's a higher number. It's actually happening way earlier in Australia than it has ever happened in the past. For those of you all that follow me, you can look on my Instagram page. I actually have a beautiful diagram showing the cases of the flu in Australia versus the past 6 years, and then when it's happening, and then how high the peak happens. And so we just saw that it is, again, for reasons in regards to reduced mitigation strategies and the changes in Omicron in terms of it actually now sharing real estate, we are starting to see those two of those combine to see this kind of surge in influenza. I would say that if the mitigation strategies were still in effect right now worldwide, we wouldn't see a lot of these viruses. Those mitigation strategies apparently were very effective in reducing a lot of these everyday respiratory viruses. SARS-CoV-2 was just so much smarter and so much more, I guess you would say, again, you got to remember, SARS-CoV-2, the level of infectivity for that, that R0, or we call it the RT, that was so much higher than a normal respiratory virus. So those mitigation strategies of the hand washing and masks were enough to keep the rest of those viruses at bay, but SARS-CoV-2 was still spilling over. Now you take all of those mitigation strategies away, and you're seeing the result of what you would see during a normal flu season.
Yep. A normal flu season, but not really normal because the numbers are so much more significantly higher. To your point. So what are you saying to your patients then specifically about the flu shot? Every year, doctors tell their patients, make sure you get the flu shot. Given the numbers and the increase in these numbers this year, what are you saying to your patients about getting the flu shots?
I'm strongly encouraging them by basically just showing them the data and telling them, trying to explain to them, your body hasn't seen this virus in a few years, and when it sees it, you could, even if you've never had a response in the past. So for my patients, as I never force them to do anything, but I tell them, hey, that's the decision you're going to have to make. Do you want to take the chance of your body having an over-the-top, uncontrolled inflammatory reaction after seeing the flu for the first time in 3-4 years? Or do you want to give it a head start by getting the flu vaccine? And usually my patients are receptive, and they understand, and they're like, well, you led me through SARS-CoV-2 and this pandemic. I don't think you're going to steer me wrong when it comes to the flu. I did get my flu vaccine. I got my flu vaccine a few weeks ago. No response to it at all, really, in terms of side effects, et cetera. So I feel good about kind of going into the winter. Not that it's perfect, but at least kind of gives you a fighting chance in terms of having a head start if you do encounter the influenza virus this season.
So Dr. Robert Drummond, on the record here, vehemently supporting, aggressively supporting the notion that you should, in fact, get a flu shot this time around, given that we already see data suggesting that the numbers that are going to be higher this year already are than they have in years past. And I think you understand, as I do, what he broke down about why we're in that situation. We did what we did to keep COVID away, but it opens up the door for this other virus to infect us and give us the flu. So note to self, make sure you get your flu shot, Tavis, this week. That said, in the 90 seconds I have left, how much of this, and I mean this, by this I mean all of this, how much of all of this is a sort of new normal for us, Dr. Drummond? You make it clear all the time the sky ain't falling, but you ain't said this ain't a new normal, though.
Well, I think the new normal is going to be if we can understand that whatever we thought we knew, we no longer know. Mm-hmm. And we're comfortable adapting to the changes that we're seeing in the post-COVID world. That is what the new normal is. The new normal is the fact that everything's changing. Yeah. Is the fact to expect the unexpected, expect these little nuances, because you're talking about a global pandemic that has changed the landscape of our immune systems. And, you know, just to put it into perspective, we all saw Michael Jackson when he was here, late, great Michael Jackson, when he wore masks all the time. Mm-hmm. But if he ever came in contact with a virus, he would get really sick because he was always wearing a mask and he wasn't priming his immune system. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're seeing right now. So for everyone, you know, that's why kids, when they go to daycare, they get sick all the time, right? They're priming their immune system when they're kids, and that's how they get that immunity over time. So this is just the new normal from the perspective of expect the unexpected, expect things to be a little bit different as we adjust to life in a post-COVID world. But once again, the sky is not falling.
As I said earlier, I love Dr. Drummond because he makes it simple. I have a phrase I use called KISS-MIP. KISS-MIP. Keep it simple, make it plain. KISS-MIP. Keep it simple, make it plain. He always does that. I got it earlier in this conversation, as I'm sure you did, but the Michael Jackson example just brings it home. And Michael Jackson on Halloween with Thriller, which we just played a while ago, so it fits in today. Dr. Drummond, thank you. Concierge physician scientist, urgent care physician, medical consultant. He does it all, including coming on our program in moments like these. Doc, thank you. We'll do it again soon. Take care of yourself, man.
All right. Thank you for having me.
More Tavis Smiley after news, traffic, and sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Mike Moore, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Georgia's candidates for governor are clashing over several key issues in their final debate before next week's midterm elections.
For Ms. Abrams to continue to try to manipulate and scare people at home and get them to believe that this is a state where it's hard to vote in is just outrageous.
Republican incumbent Brian Kemp and American Stacey Abrams clashed over abortion, voting rights, and gun control on Sunday. Both candidates said that they would respect the results of the upcoming election. Open enrollment for Obamacare starts tomorrow. Last year, around 14.5 million people bought plans through the Affordable Care Act's insurance exchanges, and even more could sign up this time around. Prices, well, they're going up 4%. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Got a crash in Van Nuys 405 southbound at Burbank Boulevard. They moved to the right-hand shoulder, still kind of slow from Nordoff Street. And in Torrance on the 405 northbound at Crenshaw Boulevard. Just going reports of a crash now blocking the carpool lane. That's a slow drive on the 110 freeway. In Irwindale on the 210 westbound at Vernon Avenue, vehicles stalled in the carpool lane, so the traffic is slow now from Grand Avenue. And in Pico Rivera, got an accident 605 northbound, partially blocking the Whittier Boulevard on-ramp. Looks like it's adding to yourself exiting.
Next Spend All Access. Get the mobile banking account with perks that add up. Banking services provided by an account established by Pathward N.A. Member FDIC. Deposit account opening is subject to registration and ID verification. Terms and costs apply.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Everybody put your hands together for the Lakers. They get their first win of the season after losing 5 straight, 121-110 over Denver at Crypto.com Arena. 26 points and 8 rebounds for LeBron James. Russell Westbrook almost had a triple-double off the bench. He finished with 18 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists. The Clippers losing streak climbs to 4. They lost by 21 to New Orleans at home. The Rams lost their 8th straight regular season game to San Francisco. 49ers running back Christian McCaffrey ran for a touchdown, caught a TD pass, and threw a TD pass. First NFL player to do that in a game since former Charger star Damian Tomlinson in 2005. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to MVP Accident Attorneys. When it comes to your settlement, we're slam dunk. Call 833-MVP-WINS or check their website at themvp.com for a free case review.
When you're the victim of a car accident, hiring the right law firm can be the difference between a rewarding settlement and striking out. Call the pros at MVP Accident Attorneys at 833-MVP-WINS for your free consultation.
Call me your MVP. Extra, extra, read all about it, read all about it, read all about it.
In recent editions of the Los Angeles Standard newspaper, read about HBCU's impact in Los Angeles. The Screening Room LA meeting at the Gathering Spot in West Adams, giving black filmmakers a place to showcase their work. The codename Crenshaw Boulevard, Malcolm X Boulevard. Hot to the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza. The Engineer Factory, preparing black children for STEM majors and professions. Jan Terry addressing the homelessness and housing crisis as she runs for Congress. Shauna Charles, career in public relations. Local black hiking groups. And Los Angeles Philharmonic Inglewood headquarters hosting free music classes for local children. Read about these stories at LAStandardNewspaper.com and follow this black-owned publication on Facebook and Instagram.
Have you heard it? Have you heard it? Have you heard it? Have you heard it? Have you heard it?
Roll out. The all-new Gardena Nissan is proud to be a partner of KBLA, and right now during their fall sales event, Zero Down delivers any new or pre-owned car at Gardena Nissan. They're located conveniently on Redondo Beach Boulevard at Western, and they specialize in helping folks out who have no credit, bad credit, bankruptcy. Folks at Gardena Nissan will take fantastic care of you and help you get into the car you need and deserve at a spectacular price. Visit them today or shop online at GardinaNissan.com. The all-new Gardena Nissan is proud to be a partner of KBLA, and right now during their fall sales event, Zero Down delivers any new or pre-owned car at Gardena Nissan. For the best deals, log on to GardinaNissan.com. Zero Down on approved credit. GardinaNissan.com. Roll out.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tavis. Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. So glad to have you with us. Our phone number 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. Make sure you get your flu shot. In case you just missed the conversation with Dr. Drummond, the numbers are way up this season, and he highly recommends that you do it to protect yourself. And thank Dr. Drummond once again for coming on. Now, has cancel culture become a threat to free speech? A conversation with essayist, author, and former political writer for the New Republic, Eve Fairbanks. Eve Fairbanks, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good to have you on the program. Let me go right at that question, and we'll build from there. Has cancel culture become a threat to free speech? And if so, how?
Yeah. So you may have read, I did an Atlantic article in the Atlantic Monthly on this question, and I just wrote a book on South Africa, and I had a lot of conversations and warnings from people ahead of publishing it, and I ended up feeling like the depiction of cancel culture, so in other words, especially people who want to combat it, people who are pro-free speech, which is an attitude in the vacuum that I really admire, but that this kind of frightening depiction of it is really pervasive, as, you know, publishers are ruled by a fear of publishing this, publishing that itself is a suppressant to free speech, because young writers become kind of afraid based on the depiction of it more than any personal experience of a reality of kind of censorious Twitter mobs, et cetera.
So your argument is that the very threat of being canceled for what you may say or write inhibits people engaging their right to free speech.
Kind of the opposite is my argument, which is the way people describe the threat. So I'll talk about you can talk about, let's say, right at the beginning of COVID, you had a lot of warnings about different types of shortages, toilet. Now, some of these might not have occurred, but the fact that that people became very afraid of them and made a rush on these certain types of necessities caused it to happen. Now, the analogy there is that the way cancel culture, the way the threat of being canceled is described by people who dislike that threat is scary, is itself kind of causing the same effect that it claims to want to fight by. I for this article that I wrote, I talked to a number of young writers, writing students who said, I'm rather thinking of majoring in pre-med. I'm afraid of being a journalist. I'm afraid of being an essayist because of the way that pro-free speech essayists and journalists describe the kind of terrifying things that you'll encounter as a journalist if you dare to express X opinion, Y opinion. The depiction of the kind of landscape, I think, is more of the threat now than actual firings, which do occur. These cancellation events in young adult literature, from publication, books being pulped, these do happen. But the way that people who are against cancel culture, pro-free speech, describe the likelihood that it'll happen to you, that you're going to get death threats, you're going to be kicked off Twitter, you're going to be made a laughing stock, that this, in fact, is more of a suppressant. It's more frightening. That's my argument.
No, we're saying the same thing. Perhaps I didn't explain it.
Yeah.
Perhaps you misheard me. I didn't explain it correctly. But no, we're on the same page. I just want to make sure that we are simpatico, and we are in this regard. Which leads to the obvious question then. When you face that kind of fear about what might happen if you express yourself, that you might be canceled, if you face that fear and that ends up suppressing the free speech you'd otherwise engage, the question is whether you, at that moment, decide to listen, to resist it, or to ignore it. To listen to it, to resist it, or ignore it. And I ask that question in part because there are people who we're watching every day, famous people, who have taken different routes to dealing with cancel culture. Some have listened, some have resisted, some have ignored it. But I can run the names, if I needed to, persons who we all know who approached this threat, if you were, this suppressing of their free speech potentially in a variety of ways. What's your take on listen, resist, or ignore?
I think you can get a really kind of binary reaction where, we've all seen, I'm sure listeners to the show have all seen people who mount a kind of eternal resistance and sometimes end up being defined by their kind of perpetual attitude of resistance against cancellation. Then you have, I wish that we could have more of a discussion around what good listening means because, often in, when you're, let's say, attacked online, which a lot of people will be, there's a kernel of something in there, even if the language isn't great, something that you might want to take on board. But I feel like it often becomes either resist or make an apology and slink away. So, what is good listening? I think is a question worth talking about more, thinking about.
How do you define at this radio station? I am always coaching and encouraging my colleagues in that regard. I say all the time, and the listeners have heard this before, no doubt, that what makes a great talk show host is generous listening. That's how I put it. Generous listening. Charitable listening. The better you listen, the better you'll be at sitting behind this microphone. If you think you're leading the conversation, you're doing it wrong. What you ought to be doing is following the person you're conversing with. So it's about generous listening, charitable listening, good listening. When you say good listening, what do you mean by that? Unpack that for me.
Yeah, I get letters sometimes in response to what I write. I'll get Twitter threads that come off, they begin with a very pugilistic, belligerent kind of lead. You're a moron, what you wrote sucks. And it's a challenging thing to say, but I do find that more frequently if I engage those people, if I try to find like the one thing that they said that maybe is an interesting point that I hadn't, a point of agreement with, it's not so critical actually, because when somebody's agitated by what you say, that at least they're interested, right? At least something got to them. So I think, and I find that if you kind of continue a conversation, sometimes they'll do that by email, sometimes they'll do it by Twitter. Obviously, there's cases in which that's going to be a losing battle and pointless, the people who just want to get your goat. But I generally find that people, they hold back that some of the most interesting kind of things that they want to discuss with you. They maybe lead with the belligerent, pugilistic stuff, and so you just have to keep going a little bit with it. With kind of a conversation.
One of my least favorite words of the last 5-7 years is the word hater. And I hate the word hater precisely because I think too many of us can't make a distinction between when somebody's hating on you versus somebody giving you a critical and necessary critique of your work or your essay or whatever it is that you may have said publicly that they disagree with. There's a fine line oftentimes between someone suggesting that they're being canceled because of what they said versus being critiqued in a way that you don't like because of what you said. Where's the line for you? Does that make sense to you between this line between canceling and critiquing?
So personally, I don't know that I have a line. I grew up in a family where there were very different views of religion within the intimate nuclear family, very different politics, and so we all got used to maybe that was a benefit. Although you've made me laugh. One of my mom's favorite words is hater. I do think that there's too much sensitivity. I don't know exactly where it comes from. Maybe it's a fear of how much our lives depend on a brand, depend on a flawless public brand, and there's a terror of getting one critical review, one tweet storm for a day or two that's very critical of something that you said, and there's a kind of need to react to that, to push it off. And I had an experience recently where I just wrote a book, and it was reviewed by a conservative publication, I would say overall negatively, but with some positive stuff in the review. And I wrote to this review in which I said I appreciated being reviewed by this publication. I wasn't expecting that. There was some really interesting stuff in there. I would encourage people to read it. I disagree with this and that. And they were so shocked that I wasn't hating on them for, and it's like, I do think it can, you have to break a spell in a way, the kind of assumption that everything negative is hate. Yeah. And that we have to respond in a certain way.
And that's my point. I here's the word hate. I hate cancel culture. I think it is unfairly pejorative and punitive. And I've been subject to that at points in my career. People want to cancel you for things you say or do. I get it. I've experienced it. And I think that's nonsensical on the one hand. On the other hand, I think we always have to be open to critique, legitimate critique. And I see a fine line between critiquing someone and trying to cancel someone. And so that line, I think, is getting more and more blurred. But God help us if we ever live in a society where you can say something and people can't critique you for what you're saying for fear of being labeled, for fear of it being suggested, rather, that you're trying to cancel them just because you're trying to critique them. They are not the same thing. I digress on that point. More of our conversation about cancel culture will be come forward with E. Fairbanks. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
The youngest person to witness George Floyd's murder releases a children's book. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News. Mid-October, 11-year-old Judea Reynolds celebrated George Floyd's 49th birthday with the release of a children's book called A Walk to the Store. Reynolds shares her perspective about the traumatic day when she watched George Floyd get murdered. She was only 9 years old. The incident caused the child to experience consistent crying and bad dreams at night. She also spoke on the witness stand during the trial. She wanted to encourage triumph in trauma, and her book will act as a resource for others.
Readers can get access to worksheets with exercises provided by Aruba Emotional Health Services to help them process trauma. Wow, amazing. I'm Aisha Cairo, and we are unapologetically progressive.
The Institute for Diversity Certification is all about the 3 Ds: dedication, determination, and discipline. Learn more about our globally recognized diversity certification program today by calling 1-800-983-6192. Again, 1-800-983-6192. Or visit diversitycertification.org. As the #1 organization for certified diversity professionals and also diversity executive credentials, diversitycertification.org will provide an opportunity for you to demonstrate dedication to the field, determination to make progress, and more discipline to your process. Go today and learn more about the diversity certification system. Call 1-800-983-6192. Again, 1-800-983-6192. Or go to diversitycertification.org. That's diversitycertification.org. The standard of excellence, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
When it comes to LA's next mayor, who can we trust to stand up for our community? The person who's always been there, Democrat Karen Bass. Unlike her opponent, fighting for principles like fairness, justice, and equal rights. She's not a billionaire real estate developer who only comes around during election time. Karen Bass has never left our side or forgotten where she came from. Take it from someone who knows.
This is Stevie Wonder. And you know what? Today, there should be no confusion. Los Angeles needs real principled leadership. We need someone who is who they say they are, with or without a hot microphone. We need someone who has been consistent with who they are in principle, party affiliation, and government service. No surprises with Karen Bass. She is who she's always been, a real honest leader. Vote Karen Bass.
Paid for by Karen Bass for Mayor 2022 General. More information at ethics.lacity.org.
KBLA Talk 1580, where hate meets a scholarly match.
Good to have you on this program in this hour. You referenced this piece you wrote earlier for The Atlantic, and I in fact read the piece. It was a beautifully written piece. Your headline was "Why I Wasn't Canceled." Unpack that. Why the audience, for those who haven't read the piece yet, of course. You say why I wasn't canceled. Unpack that headline.
Yeah. So I've lived for 13 years in South Africa, 2 years in Kenya, and spent the last 10 years researching a book about South Africa. And it follows 4 people very intimately who I spent years with, kind of living their lives after the undoing of apartheid, and 3 of them are Black South Africans. And I got a lot of warnings from people in media who I know, well-intentioned, saying, for instance, in a couple of cases that I should remove the Black people from the book, although South Africa is 90% Black, that not send the book to a couple of authors among a handful who I really, really admired, and I really wanted to send them the book. I really hoped that they would read it because those writers are Black, and that they would kind of flag me online. This was what I was told, because I only send them the book because they're Black. But I had to be really, really careful and kind of walk on eggshells not to be canceled as a white writer who had written about a country that is majority Black. And I found myself, feeling having sort of nightmares and in a way hiding the book a little bit. But I also found that after the book came out, I took stock and I realized that a lot of these warnings that I was given about what might happen, for instance, also that I would need, that my publisher would demand that I had numerous sensitivity readers who would head the text and not allow me to have any input in that. But none of that happened in my case. And it really made me think about how we think about what we can say, what we should say.
So in the end, you were not canceled. The book was written, of course. The book got out, and you ended up not being canceled. Never mind all of the naysayers who told you on the front side what was going to happen. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Eve Fairbanks, I want to ask her, as you heard, she's been living in South Africa for a decade now. I love South Africa. I've been there many times, and if I had to choose one place, if I ever got kicked out of here, the U.S. of A., which is possible, I suspect, these days, with authoritarianism, easy for me to say, on the rise these days, I could get kicked out, I suspect, one day. But if I had to live any place in the world outside the USA, I would live in Cape Town. I really, really love South Africa, and I especially love Cape Town. If I had to go somewhere, I'd go to Cape Town. But I'm curious as to why Eve Fairbanks, aside from writing the book, has chosen South Africa and apparently loves it enough to live there for a decade out of the United States. We'll get a response to that when we wrap our conversation with her when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where we turn red lights to green lights and keep it moving.
Okay, so what is Proposition 30?
Well, it's Lyft who's behind it.
The big ride-sharing corporation?
Mm-hmm. Lyft helped write and pay for Prop 30, $45 million and counting. It's a corporate money grab disguised as a climate initiative.
Oh.
Yep. See, by 2030, the law requires Lyft to use only electric vehicles for 90% of their rides. But failed to get taxpayers to pay for it.
So now they pay for Prop 30. Say it's about climate change, and if it passes, we end up paying for Lyft's cars?
That's exactly why Governor Newsom, the California NAACP, and the California Teachers Association all say, vote no on Prop 30.
Ugh, we can't afford another corporate money grab.
Let's grab our ballots and vote no on 30.
Ads paid for by No on 30. Educators opposed to corporate handouts sponsored by teachers and school employee organizations. Committee major funding from California Teachers Association and California Federation of Teachers.
Now arriving, the K. Metro's newest rail line connects communities like West Adams, the Crenshaw District, Baldwin Hills, Leimert Park, Inglewood, and more. Transfer easily to the E-line to connect to Santa Monica, Culver City, USC, and downtown. Ride the K to comfort food, culture, and an improved commute. 7 new K-line stations now open. Learn about K-line ride and more at metro.net/K-line. KBLA Talk 1580 is the official station of the K-line.
Our Weekly Los Angeles is the largest audited black newspaper in the state of California with a distribution of over 50,000 copies weekly. Pick up a copy every Thursday to get the latest news on African American communities of LA. You can also keep up with what's going on in Los Angeles and surrounding cities by going to www.ourweekly.com. The Our Weekly website is updated daily with the current news about us and for us. For your advertising needs, Our Weekly offers economical advertising packages to fit your budget. Feel free to call Our Weekly Los Angeles at 323-905-1300 or visit the website at www.ourweekly.com. Our Weekly Los Angeles, reporting news that matters to you.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
Eve Fairbanks, your book is called The Inheritors, An Intimate South Africa's Racial Reckoning. Why did you choose South Africa?
I wanted to get out of Washington. I was a reporter there for about 4 years, and wanted to see another part of the world, and not have such an insular American type of view, and started to read the history of South Africa. I was 11 when apartheid ended in 1994, when Mandela became president, and I followed that some, but only made an impact when I really started to read about it. And it's such an incredibly vibrant, diverse country with such a unique history. But somebody once said to me that they felt they'd spent a ton of time in South Africa, kind of had a similar equation, or the same equation in terms of the history with race as America, different variables. And I think there's something to that. And that is a reason why a lot of Americans, when they come to South Africa, when they spend time there, they really, really feel touched by it, because it's a little bit of an alternate history. You have some of the same settler stuff, and then you have a country now that's run by people of color, which is really exciting. It's very challenging. It's very, very vivid situation.
Yeah. I've got less than 2 minutes to go here. So what have you learned finally about your insular American point of view? How have you critiqued or canceled your own insular American point of view?
Yeah, we do think we're living at the end of history. People made fun of that phrase when I was a kid, but we feel we're the only country on some level, I think so many of us, that's ever faced some of the problems that we're facing right now, ever faced some of the conflicts that we're having. And, some countries are more relevant to American history and have more parallels than others. But if you go overseas, especially South Africa, if you learn a little bit about that country, you realize that there are other countries that are grappling, already done, and already gone through some of the transitions that we are terrified of, and don't have perfect solutions, but have lived them, have lived it out, and survived.
Yeah. Beautifully stated. Beautifully stated. It's one of the many reasons why I love the continent of Africa, but especially and particularly the country of South Africa. E. Fairbanks has a book. It's called The Inheritors, an intimate portrait of South Africa's racial reckoning. Having spent a decade there covering the story and meeting the people, qualified, of course, to write this book, once again called The Inheritors, an intimate portrait of South Africa's racial reckoning. We've been spending the most of this conversation talking about an article she wrote for The Atlantic that I found fascinating called Why Wasn't I Canceled? I close again by saying being canceled is one thing, being critiqued is another, and we should never confuse or blur the line between the two. E. Fairbanks, good to have you on the program. All the best to you.
Thank you, Tavis.
Good to have you on today. Hour 3 of Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580 after news, traffic, and sports.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Doug Davis, and here's the latest from the Black